Well, we are at that time. So good evening, C4 members. Those of you that are here as panelists and as attendees, thank you for joining us on a gorgeous Thursday. I see that the mayor of Wilsonville is outside taking in the sun and the beautiful evening. Many of us appear to be cooped up inside. So thank you all for jumping in. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So Trent, if you'll do the honors of casting a flag for us, that would be swell. All right, here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Trent, thank you for the opening day flag there at Ranger Stadium.
You're welcome.
All right. Next on the agenda is just quick welcome and introductions. And so I will do my best to make it down through the list without it getting too jumbled up. So top of my list there, Mr. Gornick.
Hello, Paul Gornick from Oak Lodge Water Services.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Lyle Smith.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith, Mayor of Oregon City.
Thank you very much for being here. We'll come back to you momentarily. Mr. Brashear.
All right, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Dwight Brashear. I am the Transit Director for SMART, owned and operated by the City of Wilsonville. I represent the urban transit providers.
Excellent. Thank you for being here, sir. Mr. Gronke.
Ed Gronke. I'm the citizen rep for Ypac from Clackamas County.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Buck.
Joe Buck, Mayor of Lake Oswego. Good evening, everyone.
Thank you. Mayor Fitzgerald.
Julie Fitzgerald, Mayor of Wilsonville. Try it with sound. Thank you.
There you go. Councilor Heisey.
Kathy Heisey. I'm here for Milwaukee, and I'm also the Clackamas City's representative to Jpac.
Great. How was Mark's State of the City address?
Not as long as he threatened. It was good. I'll be off camera for a little bit while I eat dinner.
Okay, there you go. Mr. Cernak.
Hello.
Okay. Kenny, you want to give us who you are and who you're representing tonight?
Yep, I'm Kenny Cernak. I'm a board member with the Hamlet of Beaver Creek, representing the Hamlets.
Perfect, thank you. Miss Stewart.
Hi, Marge Stewart from Furwood CPO, and I'm the alternate representative for the CPOs.
Wonderful, thanks for being here. Commissioner Shull.
Yes, yes, good evening. Commissioner Mark Shull, Clackamas County. Glad to be with you tonight.
Thank you for being here, sir. Mr. Kaiser.
Scott Kaiser, Mayor of Molalla.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Todd Wood.
Hello, Todd Wood, Canby Area Transit, owned and operated by the City of Canby, representing the small rural providers. I apologize for a lack of camera, but I'm not in a good camera location.
It's okay. Miss Pratt.
Valerie Pratt, Halton City Council, where it's very nice and warm tonight.
Very good. Commissioner Savas.
Paul Savas, Clackamas County Commissioner. Hello, everyone.
Perfect. And as always, Brian Hodson, Mayor of Canby, and glad to be here. Trent, our Clackamas County staff member that keeps us all on track and moving ever forward. Did I miss anybody? I think I missed Mayor Walters there. I think I did.
Hi, Mayor Walters from West Lynn. Nice to see everybody.
Well, it's nice for you to be here. Thank you. Trent, did you want to do the run down the attendees list real quick?
Yeah, thanks for that. We have a good group tonight, including our panel. That's Bill Stewart and Vahid Brown and Mr. Tompkins Rosenblatt, as well as Chief Band from Oregon City. And so we're going to hear from them shortly, and I'll start bringing y'all over soon. In addition, we have staff from Happy Valley. That's Jamie and Laura. We have staff from Wilsonville. That's Mark, always in attendance and always welcome. Counselor Verdict from Lake Oswego, Counselor Craddock from Metro, and I don't see your counterpart, Counselor Craddock. I might move you in just a moment. So that makes up the bulk of our group here. We have a Hughes family note and a phone number. I'm not familiar with them, but they're also in attendance as well. We'll call them public until we know otherwise.
Great. Thank you, Trent. And as I said, it would come back to Mayor Lyle Smith. As many of you know, that she has big plans underfoot for her family and will be stepping out of the role of mayor there of Oregon City. And I just wanted to say, Rachel, thank you for serving as the mayor of Oregon City. I think you did a great job and really came in at a time when Oregon City needed some guidance and help with some of the transition there. And I thought you did a great job, and you will be missed, here amongst us at C4. And I know Paul and I both appreciate your contributions to C4 for the time that you've been here. And we all wish you the best of luck. I know that that's a tough thing to have to do and make a move like that, but just means other opportunities for you. So thank you for all that you've done.
Thanks, Mayor Hodson. Yeah, I've learned so much from this group. So thank you to you all for sharing your wisdom and knowledge. And a lot of us volunteer sometimes for the first time in the political arena. So it's always good to learn from each other and share and collaborate. And I've definitely done that with many of you. It has been a pleasure. And this is my last C4 meeting, and I have C4 subcommittee, I think, next week or week after, and but that'll be it at the end of April.
Well, very good. Well, thank you. Commissioner Savas, did you have a few words?
Yeah, I really appreciate, Mayor, your contribution to C4 and on a number of topics, especially with the tolling and the I-205 work and all the work with the shelter there in Oregon City and everything you've done. So I really appreciate you. We're going to miss you sincerely, and hope to see. I know you have the Oregon City Council's got some changes coming up, because I think a majority of the council is not coming back. So lots to watch. So I don't know what's around the corner, but I guess you're having a special election to fill your seat. Is that correct? In September?
It'll be in August, a special election, right? Of course, right before a general election. And if you want to know like all the various scenarios for all of our commission members of whether or not they should run for the special, and if they can run, or if they can run for the November. And of course, we have charter amendments on the May ballot. And so depending on the charter amendments, that can make a difference. So like we ran through, like, I felt like 100 scenarios last night at our meeting, and it was kind of amusing. We were all laughing about it as to who could run and who couldn't run. And, it's definitely a mess. But we actually have Commissioner Marl is the only one. He was filling my term that I vacated. So it's only the mayor position and Commissioner Marl that our terms will be ending at the end of this year. Otherwise, Commissioner O'Donnell and Commissioner Rocky Smith and Commissioner Denise McGriff will be continuing. So the majority will still be there. And I don't, we keep prodding Adam Marl to consider running or taking a position. So we'll see what he does. He is the C4 alternate. I looked it up just a second ago. So we're going to go through all of my committees next week, but for right now, Commissioner Marl is my alternate for C4. So you may see him pretty soon. He also attended the Impact meeting. He was in the attendees list, watching and listening to what we talked about at Impact. So I think he'll be a good one to step in.
Well, again, thank you. And between Father's Heart, Willamette Falls, all the development opportunities going on in Oregon City, I know you've had a lot to handle. So you've done a great job as mayor. So thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. We're going to move into some housekeeping pieces. I'll We got the approval of the minutes of the March 3rd C4 meeting. Are there any comments, questions, or on that? Seeing no hands, I'll take a motion to approve those.
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor Kaiser. Is there a
I'll second.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, minutes passed. Thank you all very, very much. Next on the agenda is the notice of co-chair appointment and a continuation piece. Trent?
Thank you very much. So, our bylaws are interesting, and at the last meeting was our annual business meeting where the cities chose who their appointments were. And so Mayor Stemple continues as the urban city seat, Mayor Hodson continues in the rural cities seat. And then at the executive committee is where the executive committee chooses who is the co-chair beside the county seat. And the executive committee appointed Mayor Hodson to continue in his term. And so long time running, I think since 2015, if that's my memory, early 2015. So we've got some good tenure here with our co-chairs, and I'll be looking forward to serving alongside them to support them in their leadership as well as executive committee moving into the next year. And then I guess one more point here is, and this was asked earlier, is the still vacant water seat. And the water districts are having like an open call of enrollment right now through the early part of next week. They're going to meet shortly after that to make that appointment. So I'm hoping to have that water seat filled back for C4 here by your May meeting. And that is a voting seat. And we'll look forward to have almost a complete roster once again. We still always have that vacancy in Johnson City and Barlow. It's tough ones to fill, as well as Portland as a member here. So another tough one to fill because they have so few houses in the Clackamas County, but they are technically a Clackamas County city. Let's not forget.
Okay. So not necessarily any action necessarily by the group here, just more of an update then there, Trent?
That's correct. No action.
All right. Well, I'll just say thank you to the executive committee for, again, putting me forward to be the co-chair. I appreciate that. And I appreciate all of you and that support as well. So thank you for that. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that. All right, moving into the crux of tonight, a deeper dive into shelter services in Clackamas County. And we're going to start with a panel discussion. And I think we've got Vahid Brown here. I see his screen up there, and a host of others that will be joining us, I think, to have some dialogue. Trent, or Commissioner Savas, any additional input to get this started?
No, just want to say that as you have all requested in our past couple of meetings about a discussion around shelters, and we appreciate that. We also sent the executive committee sent a letter to all the members of C4, and then a couple of days later, Chair Smith and met with the mayors for their monthly meeting and chatted about opportunities. And so we have, and I've heard this from actually taking office in 2011, one of our rural cities approached me back then and said, Commissioner, what are you doing, or what are we going to be doing about the homeless situation that we have out here in my city? And that city was Sandy back in 2011. So it's been a problem a long time, and the problem's certainly growing. So we have really across the county, really a regional need. And I know that Vahid has spoken in the past about, the homeless people sometimes, or those that are houseless or find themselves houseless are often residents in the local area, and they choose to be houseless where they are. They don't want to be houseless, but they are. So maybe we have a little discussion about that and how we accommodate that somehow in a humane way. So with that, I turn it over to the panel, I guess, or Trent.
Yeah, thanks. And I do want Vahid to introduce our group that's here tonight. That he works really closely with all of them, and I'm really grateful for them all showing up tonight. This is a great group that kind of introduce our C4 members to the work that's happening right now on the ground, that's been happening on the ground. And this is a topic that's newish to this committee. And so I'm saying that for the panel, as much as it is for this group, we've been steeped in transportation policy topics for almost as long as I've worked at C4 and here at the county. And that's not a bad thing. And this group decided a couple of years ago that transportation is part of housing because there's movement and mobility, and that's a big part of the conversation. And part of C4 also talks about, it's in your bylaws to navigate different issues around land use connectivities. And that's also has a connection and an intersection with housing. But it's been challenging, I think, for this group to find those points of intersection where this coordinating body with all of our cities can actually find those points of common ground to coordinate on common policies. Because as y'all have said, as we've all talked about, houselessness doesn't really have a city boundary. There's movement across city lines, across county lines, and it creates a lot of challenges that many of y'all navigate, many of y'all talk about here, about those challenges and wanting to figure out some of those solutions where we can have those common grounds to navigate together. So I'm really excited for this group coming in tonight to talk about what exists and what how they feel. And I think this is kind of teed up in this way, where those points of sheltering can intersect with some of that work that y'all have in policy to introduce the opportunity for sheltering in some of our cities or jurisdictions. What are some of those menu items? And I would just say this can be a first conversation. We've had so much conversation around transportation that I know very easily how to support y'all in moving transportation policy conversations forward. This can be, it's not your first conversation around housing, but it can be a first conversation around sheltering to help me know how to help you move some policy items forward or menu items forward for helping this group reach some sort of potential policy direction in the future. It doesn't have to be next month or the month after, but this is a good first conversation. So ask them questions when they're done. Help me understand where y'all's positions are to help y'all move forward here at C4. And think about that letter that the executive committee sent out just a few weeks ago, which is sort of a commitment that y'all's interest in having this topic what resonated really well with them, and it's their priority to make this conversation at the front of the agenda as much as we can. And so y'all's questions, y'all's Q&A, y'all's commitments, and whatever y'all say here, we're writing it down so that I know how best to help you. So I wanted to put all that on the table to say, doesn't have to get anywhere tonight. It can just be a good conversation, ask a lot of good questions. And I'm really grateful for the four of y'all for showing up tonight, in particular, my colleague Vahid, and I'll pass it to you.
Thank you, Trent, and good evening, everybody. I'm Vahid Brown, the Supportive Housing Services Program Manager with Clackamas County. Trent, would you like me to introduce the other three first before I kind of deliver some remarks?
Yes, please.
All right, great. So joining us tonight are three folks I've worked with a lot over the last several years in Clackamas County on issues surrounding homelessness. I'm going to just briefly introduce them. I'll offer some comments about the county's current work on sheltering, and then turn it to my colleagues, Bill, Peter, and Chief Band to offer their perspectives from their where they sit. So Peter Rosenblatt, who is joining us, is with the Northwest Housing Alternatives. Peter has been working in social services for 35 years. He's the program manager for the Homeless Intervention Services Department of Northwest Housing Alternatives, and that includes managing the Annie Ross Family Homeless Shelter. Bill Stewart, community prosecutor with the District Attorney's Office. He's been a community prosecutor for 17 years. It's pretty awesome, Bill. I work with Bill a lot in his roles as the community prosecutor with the Neighborhood Livability Project, and more specifically with the Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion Program, which is a program that Bill and I helped to start in Clackamas County that in partnership with law enforcement and the District Attorney's Office diverts people experiencing homelessness from arrest and incarceration to connections with case management services and housing. And it's been going on for about 4 years now. It's an incredibly successful program, and Bill has been a fantastic partner in meeting the needs of people experiencing homelessness in the community. And Chief Jim Band is the Chief of Police of the City of Oregon City. I've also worked extensively with Chief Band on homelessness since I first started to work at Clackamas County 6 years ago. Jim is Chief Band, I'm sorry, is one of the co-founders and instigators of a coalition of community partners several years ago that started the Homeless Solutions Coalition of Oregon City, which later expanded to become the Homeless Solutions Coalition of Clackamas County, and has led a lot of the city's work around addressing the needs of the community with respect to homelessness. Has had 2 successive police officers on his force that are dedicated to this issue and are liaison officers to the community of people experiencing homelessness in his city. So thank you, the 3 of you, for coming. Trent, if I could just speak for a few minutes and then I'll turn it over to my friends about shelter and safety off the streets in Clackamas County. So safety off the streets is an umbrella term for what it says. Unsheltered homelessness, living on the street, is dangerous. It's unhealthy. It causes people to become sick and people to experience trauma. The average age of death of people who die while experiencing homelessness in our region is 46. Hundreds of people die in our region every year who are experiencing homelessness, 126 in 2020 in Multnomah County alone. So safety off the streets is something that is a necessary intervention for folks who are experiencing a lack of housing. And it can look a number of ways. Shelter is the most typical and traditionally understood, and a congregate place where folks experiencing homelessness can spend the night out of the weather. But it can also be a variety of other things. And there's a memo in your packet that describes 5 or 6 different models of safety off the streets that was discussed by the Board of County Commissioners a few weeks ago. I'm not going to go into that in any depth, but so what we're talking about here is that component, safety off the streets, which is the first step towards ending someone's homelessness. Shelter and safety off the streets doesn't itself end homelessness. It doesn't end anyone's homelessness, but it is an important intervention to provide safety for folks who are otherwise exposed to all of those things that lead to the situation where the average age of someone dying who is experiencing homelessness being 46. So shelter and safety off the streets is part of a continuum of services and resources that we are investing in and are dedicating staff and partnerships with our community partners, with law enforcement and so forth, to end homelessness in the county. Our goal is that homelessness in Clackamas County is rare, brief, and not recurring. And in order to achieve that goal, safety off the streets is an important component of a continuum, the end goal of which is permanent housing. And in that light, that's where our plan, our local implementation plan for supportive housing services does prioritize investments in expanding safety off the streets, but it does so coupled with investments in transitions to permanent housing, rent assistance for folks who have very low incomes, and supportive services for people who need those supports to remain successful in their housing. The county has historically had significant gaps in our shelter system, although we do have a lot of shelter programs that we do provide, and those are all listed, and the numbers of beds that they have are listed in your packet in the continuum of care inventory. I think that starts on page 7 of your packet. One of the main gaps for the county historically has been for individual adults experiencing homelessness. Our shelter system as it exists historically has focused on folks fleeing domestic violence. That accounts for the largest share of our shelter system. Over half of our available shelter beds are within our domestic violence system. Shelter for families experiencing homelessness. That's the program that Peter runs with Northwest Housing Alternatives, but also some smaller programs that we invest in with church partners, the Lake Oswego Transitional Shelter Ministry and the Aurora Shelter. That's an apartment owned by Christ Lutheran Church in Aurora. And then we also have the Veterans Village, which is a transitional shelter for veterans experiencing homelessness. But we haven't historically had year-round shelter for adults experiencing homelessness. That changed in COVID. Under COVID, we invested in a motel shelter program for people experiencing homelessness who would be at acute risk of severe illness if they contracted the COVID-19 virus. At the height of that program, we had over 130 rooms, motel rooms that were paid for by the county to provide that shelter for individuals, couples, and families. But it was really a new step into the county having a larger role in providing shelter for adults experiencing homelessness. It's been a successful component of a continuum that ends in homelessness once we had the implementation of the supportive housing services program. That allowed us to invest in housing navigation and long-term rent assistance targeted at individuals staying in this motel program to move them from the motel program into permanent housing. Over 70 households have been moved into permanent housing in that program thus far. Another 70 have rent assistance vouchers in their hands and caseworkers working with them to find apartments. So we're well on our way to have ended the homelessness of the folks that were most at risk of severe illness. And they were deemed so because they were highly vulnerable. So that's really a success. Needs, though, still outstrip supply for safety off the street. So we still have a community in Clackamas County of people who are unsheltered, living on the streets in the woods in their vehicles and have nowhere that is meant for human habitation to rest at night or to escape the hazards of the weather and the fires and the smoke and all those things. 1,000 people or more, according to our most recent data. So even though we have currently around 450 units of shelter of different types of those ranges that I described, veterans, family, domestic violence in the motel program, it's not enough to meet the need for folks and to provide that safety. So we are investing in an expansion of shelter capacity in a lot of different ways. The supportive housing services program is the program that I manage. We released a program offer soliciting bids from community providers last Monday, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, with the intention of investing about $2.5 million in new investments in shelter and ongoing funding for existing programs that need that ongoing funding. But there's a wealth of new resources coming to the county in the next fiscal year that will also support further expansion. A $2 million direct allocation from the state in its most recent legislative session to Clackamas County for shelter services. The Project Turnkey has been funded again with $40 million to fund 12 projects. Clackamas County is eligible for that. A lot of new federal resources of various types that I won't describe. And we issued, or the board has directed staff to issue a request for information, which we will be doing in April, soliciting information from the community for concepts, models, approaches that community partners are ready to deploy to provide safety off the streets to our neighbors who are experiencing homelessness. So that will be coming out soon, hoping that a lot of creativity and innovation and community partnerships will come together and bring to light new ways for us to provide this safety off the streets for folks. But in my last word here, we also need help. So one way that jurisdictions can really support that work and our success in investing in these programs that will come forward through that RFI is assistance with identifying suitable properties, suitable spots, land that we can look at to site shelter. Siting shelter has remained a bedeviling factor for expanding shelter throughout the United States. Portland and the Portland area and Clackamas County are no different. It's tough. People experiencing homelessness are among the most stigmatized people in our societies. We have a lot of assumptions and judgments often about people experiencing homelessness, and those run deep and viscerally, and neighborhoods and communities are often very averse to siting shelter anywhere near them. And so that remains an issue that we struggle with in expanding capacity. So would love collaboration and support from jurisdictions in that work. I've taken enough time. I want to turn the mic over to my friends who have joined tonight. I don't have a particular order in mind, so I'm just going to pick on someone unless one of the three of you raises your hand and jumps to the front. All right, I'm going to pick on Peter Rosenblatt to start us off.
Thank you, Vahid, and it's nice seeing everyone. My name is Peter Rosenblatt, and I am the program manager at Northwest Housing Alternatives. I oversee their Homeless Intervention Services Department, and at the core of that is the Annie Ross Family Shelter. Excuse me. This year, at the Annie Ross Shelter is celebrating our 36th year. And what I can say, I've been at NHA for the last 2.5 years, although as Vahid has pointed out, I've been doing the social services for 35 years. I've done it in 5 different states, and the common type of program that I've worked with is shelter. Shelter is near and dear to my heart. What I can say, though, in the last 2.5 years at Annie Ross is we have served families from all of the cities and areas that I am seeing on this screen. We are a true county-wide shelter, and homelessness is a county-wide issue. As much as shelter is near and dear to my heart, it's very important that I echo what Vahid had said. Shelter does not end homelessness. Housing ends homelessness. Shelter provides a safe place for individuals, families in my case, also for youth, to be at while they are looking for housing. But if you don't have that housing component, shelters can get filled quickly. We are full tonight. We currently have a 8 family capacity. We are applying through the proposal that Vahid had mentioned earlier to expand. And the 8 families that are in shelter tonight are able to move out of shelter because of housing programs. So when you think of shelter, please keep housing in mind. They go together. They go together. I would also just want to call your attention to, I'm looking at your packet, on page 17 and 18 is some different types of safety off the street models. I believe this came from a presentation that Vahid gave to the Board of County Commissioners, or at least that may be where I had first seen it. And what I can say is all of these work, and we need more of all of these. And when I say we, it's not just Clackamas County, it's the Tri-County area, it's the state of Oregon, it's around the United States. There is not a one-size-fits-all approach. The final thing that I want to say is to just sort of keep in mind about who we at Annie Ross, who we serve. The average family that we serve did not know 2 months ago that they were going to be homeless. Homelessness creeps up quickly, very, very quickly. And so there are families tonight on April 7th who do not know that in June, they will be experiencing homelessness. I think that's all I'll say for now. And I don't know if am I passing it or you're passing it back to you, Vahid?
Yeah, or you can pick someone and save me the awkwardness of having to choose who goes next.
Okay, well, just because I met with him a couple of weeks ago, Bill Stewart.
Thanks, Peter. Again, my name is Bill Stewart. I'm a prosecutor with the DA's office. I've been there 20 years. For the last 17 years, I've been a community prosecutor. And as part of that, I've been addressing homelessness as it impacts the criminal justice system at the DA's office. And for most of my time as a community prosecutor, quite frankly, what we've done is try to address homelessness in a more traditional manner. We kind of chase it around. We sanction people when they break the law, whether that's trespass or low misdemeanors. And for the most challenged homeless people, quite frankly, we haven't solved any problems. We can address problems in a specific area by like breaking up a campsite or something like that, but it's not like we just moved them elsewhere. What I guess my worldview has changed over the last 3 years, and part of this, he talked about the LEAD program, and I've worked with some other nonprofits that have changed my perception. But the other thing that happened was the pandemic. When the motel program opened, we had more chronically homeless single adults in transitional housing than we'd ever had in my 17 years as a community prosecutor. If you'd asked me in 2018, best case scenario, what can you do for the chronically homeless population in terms of reducing the impact they have on the streets? I would have said, well, if we do 20%, I'll be amazed. Well, after watching the motel program, I would say we should be looking at something like 50% of these folks. Now, that said, let me kind of explain my approach. I'm a DA. I still work in court. I still send folks I think have committed crimes to prison. I love that work. I am here to address public safety, to enhance public safety, and to improve the quality of life in our communities. And now I firmly believe that the way to do that is to get people housed, particularly when you're dealing with the most challenged folks you see on the street. Those are the folks that I end up hearing about, whether police agencies call me and say, listen, we've arrested this person 15 times and they're right back out on the same spot causing the same problems, or neighbors come together and say, hey, we've got real issues here. And so I guess what I'd say is I think transitional housing is critical to that success. And that's what I've seen again over the last couple of years. It's where I'm working now is with the program, the LEAD program, and some other nonprofits, including Love One. And what I've seen is that what they do is they build trust with these folks. And these are people, the last person they want to see is someone like me. I mean, I've been making their lives miserable for 17 years. And now we're starting to develop partnerships where we still hold people accountable for their actions, but the solution is try to connect them into a program, get them housed, and ultimately get them off the street. That's the way I can look a business owner or a neighbor and say, I'm actually trying to solve your problem. I'm not just moving it down the street and that person might be back. Once we get them into housing, the successes become very, very possible. We're not solving everybody's problem, but we've made more impact. We've housed more people than I ever thought we would, and really some of the most challenged. The other thing I'll say is what I've seen about transitional housing is you get them into a place where you can find them. I mean, that sounds kind of strange, but if you're trying to connect people to services, try to get them a job, try to get them medical care, try to get them ID or all the different things you need to address, when you can't find them, you can't develop any continuity of service. And of course, they're still exposed to that trauma that they experience when they're homeless. We're seeing that right now in the Newell Creek Canyon area. For those of you who are in the Oregon City area, we have this very challenging metro property of 200 plus acres that also impacts ODOT, impacts Clackamas County and Oregon City. We have somewhere between 50 to 70 homeless people in and around that area. And right now, those folks are getting moved out, pushed out of their campsites. And so these folks are there because they're some of the most challenged we've seen. Our partners are really starting to work with Vahid's work and some other folks. We're starting to get some of those folks housed. And again, I didn't think that had happened. So I would speak to the importance of transitional housing in that process, whatever form that may be. The other point I would make is that what I've seen in the motel program is that it can cause challenges to neighborhoods where the motels are sited. We ran into an issue at the Comfort Suites on 205 where we had concentrations of homeless folks, 30 plus folks there, and there was some neighbor pushback. To address that, we've developed partnerships with the sheriff's office and with some other nonprofits, and we meet monthly. We look at the call volumes, and when we identify a problem, we try to solve it. And so it's that kind of hands-on problem solving that we can support different transitional housing projects to make sure that we're not burdening a neighborhood or we're not putting undue impact on them. The last thing I'll say is you may well have heard of some of the changing legal environment around homelessness in the United States, particularly in the Ninth Circuit area. So Martin v. Boise was a case that has been followed up now by a case in Oregon, Blake versus City of Grants Pass, that is making it more difficult for jurisdictions to enforce rules or laws like criminal trespass. And I won't go into detail on that, but one of the key issues there is that you have to have sufficient shelter beds to be able to apply those laws or city ordinances that affect in the same way. I have not seen the question about where does that shelter have to be. So there's a proximity issue here, I think. And so it'd be one thing if you're in Sandy, just to pick a choice, and you say, well, we've contracted to have shelter beds someplace in North Portland. I don't know if a court's going to find that. I don't think the answer's there. I think we need to look at possibly having transitional sites more spread out in our county to be successful. That's all I'm going to say, unless you guys have any questions of me. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Chief Band.
Okay, I'm going to spend a quick couple hours talking about the challenges that we've had.
So what Vahid said to me was to talk about challenges and successes that we've had. And I'm going to talk sort of fast because there's no way to really go completely in on this in this amount of time. Father's Heart came to our city in the end of 2012, and it really changed the landscape of this community. There were a lot of services that were now being provided in our town. And as a police department, there's a huge evolution. We went, when you've heard when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And that was our initial approach. We'll just arrest our way out of this issue. And we quickly learned that that was just not going to work. And so there's been this evolution over 10 years where we have learned a lot about homelessness. And that's my perspective. That's been my education. We deal with homeless people and homeless calls every single day, every single night, a lot of them. I think one of the biggest challenges is people's lack of understanding about homelessness. And I think if you ask me, where does the problem reside? It is a housing problem, but I wouldn't say that it's primarily a housing problem. I would say it's a social services problem. 80 to 85% of the people that we contact on the street, if we say, hey, I've got a shelter bed for you to go to, they refuse. Why is that? It's not because they're stubborn, or it's that people are complicated. And most of them come from some sort of trauma that led them into drug addiction, or they have behavioral health issues that need to get addressed. And so there needs to be a lengthy process of forming trust and a relationship. There's people that have taken us 1.5 years with our community partners to finally get them into housing. Sometimes we get them into treatment and they're out in 3 days. And it is just a process, and they're all different. They're different a community as any other. I think that is the hardest thing for us is not having. When I think about sheltering, and I would agree with what people said about this hotel program has been very successful. And if there was anything that I think needs to continue, if you have somebody who's living on the street, using drugs, and they sort of over time start living kind of like a homeless person, and you just plot them with long-term rent assistance into an apartment of people, they're still thinking like a homeless person. And so they're going to have a dozen of their buddies there, and they're still using drugs, and they're going to get kicked out soon, and that's going to do them no good. So the whole idea, and what we've seen in the transitional housing program working, is you've got some time to start working through with people and setting them up for success. And that is getting them the drug and alcohol treatment they need, the behavioral health treatment that they need, getting them some documents, having lead people next to them to sort of prep them. So when we put them in, that we're successful at that. I didn't understand any of this stuff 10 years ago, but the importance of a coordinated effort from the street all the way to the end there is extremely important. If I had any ask or hope, one of my wishes would be that, and I think this position should reside at the county, was that there was a houseless, homeless czar, or somebody who was coordinating. You've got all these different people trying to do things in the county without really talking to each other. And I don't mean the county employees, I mean the county, cities. And there's no real coordination that I see, because people come to us like, and I see it with other people. Anybody who's doing something, people are just hungry for that right now. And I think there's a lot of opportunity with grants. If there was somebody whose sole job was to coordinate how behavioral health, how addiction services coordinated with housing and all these nonprofits, that's been one of the biggest challenges. Successes, staffing. We have our full-time officer position, gaining trust again. We've got people on the street that we deal with that they don't want to talk to any officer but Officer Haynes. And it's because they've met Officer Haynes, they're familiar, and so that's who they want to talk to. Training our officers and the rest of our city staff about how to interact with people from the homeless community. Little things like, we've had staff people say, hey, there's a homeless guy on the bench. You got to come kick him off, and training our staff to say, look, if my grandma was asleep on the bench, you wouldn't call. So just because he's homeless or appears to be homeless, he still gets to sleep on the bench. And so getting, that whole training process, I think, for our community has been really a success. Our behavioral health specialist, we've got a master's level clinician in-house at the police department. And it's been extremely successful as we're trying to coordinate services for people. Instead of a police officer talking to another clinician, we have a clinician talking to another clinician. We've had successes with the VA, with people that if we have a cop talking to somebody, we're not going to have the success that we are going to be with one mental health specialist talking to another mental health specialist. One other challenge I'll mention, I'm just going to stop in the interest of time. If there was another challenge for us, we have a reputation, and it's true, we have a lot of services in town. So we find that communities, we've caught cities from Washington County, other cities in Clackamas County, especially when there's cold weather, dropping homeless people off in our city. And that sort of creates a burden. And well, not sort of, it does. And so when I think about this coordination piece and I think about sheltering and where they get put, I feel like it needs to be more tactical. And I feel like if you look at the county and you just looked regionally about where you could put shelters so that everybody was doing a little rather than the communities who were feeling more of a burden, I think that some of this animosity and fear that the house community has toward homelessness might be reduced. So I'm just going to stop there.
I'm just going to jump in real quick and say thanks for those opening remarks. And Mayor Hodson and Commissioner Savis, let me know how I can help you facilitate a Q&A time here while we have our group. This is the issue du jour for your agenda tonight. And so we're good until 8 o'clock when we have another topic. We could also go a little bit past 8, but I'm here to help facilitate discussion if y'all need it, co-chairs.
Thanks, Trent. I appreciate that. Gentlemen, thank you for, as Trent said, the introductions and giving us some background on what your experiences have been so far. And I know that hands are going up already. And so this is an important issue. And I know as we look at, some conversation has been occurring in some of the more rural cities too, on how do we make these services available there to take maybe some of the burden and stress off of some of the cities like Oregon City in this regard. So I would say if you've got questions or comments, throw your hand up and I'll just kind of keep working through the hands up list as I see it here on the participant side, and we'll kind of go through it and hopefully at the end of this, what I'd like maybe in the last 10 minutes is discuss what potential next steps we want to take as a coordinating committee to be able to have staff work on bringing things back to us, or maybe start kind of narrowing down the scope of where we want to kind of go with this conversation. Conversation is good, action is better. So we'll start with Mayor Walters of West Lynn. You had your hand first up, so your floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you all for that presentation. It was extremely helpful, excellent information. And what I wanted to do was follow up on one of the last things that the chief said, which is something I hear often in the community, is this concern of if we build it, they will come. So if we build a shelter, that suddenly will have an influx of people who are houseless from around the regional area. And that's concerning to some community members, to be frank. They usually follow that up with, but I want to make sure that we're helping people. I mean, doesn't always come from a terrible place, but there is that concern. So I was wondering, does the data bear that out? And if so, how do you usually have that discussion with community members?
I don't know who, I guess I can answer. We have really dealt with this. And I had actually written this as another challenge, is that people in communities who voice their fears, that's one of the challenges, is a lot of times they're seen as lacking compassion or empathy. And their voices, you know, their fears are realistic fears. I will say that there is some of that. You can't create a destination that's going to help people without having some spillover. But I also say that's why it's so much more important that there's a clear plan. You know, where are we going to locate and when I say tactical, I'm thinking, what are the best locations? Where are these folks who are going to come? Are they going to have access to transit and those sorts of things? Maybe making sure that they're not plopped down in the middle of a neighborhood, maybe on the edge of a neighborhood. And then where they are located, what are the things that we could do to minimize some of those impacts? And I think that by coordinating that whole thing as a group, I think there are definitely ways that we could make it better. We can't make it perfect, but I think one of the things that the community really responds to is a good plan. I think that when we come off as government, like we don't have an organized plan, they have a problem with that.
Thank you.
If I could add something to that. At the Annie Ross House, we only serve families from Clackamas County. And we've been full ever since since I started, since we reopened our campus in Milwaukee 2.5 years ago. Coordination has been mentioned. We do get calls from families who are not within Clackamas County. And then we reach out to our colleagues and to other coordinated entry points around the state. It's our goal and the goal of others in the provider community to help families stay in their home community, So what I think the data does show is that there are more homeless people in Clackamas County today than there are services at this point. And so I do understand, I've heard it for 35 years, if you build it, they will come. I haven't seen that much of it. What I do see is another way of phrasing it is, if you build it in your community will use it.
The other point I would add is you need to partner with your law enforcement. They need, as in Oregon City, they need to be at the table to address those concerns and fears your community may have. And as Chief Ban says, there has to be a plan. What we try to do is, bring in the criminal justice system, try to provide that support to minimize those points of conflict.
And just add a piece to what my colleagues have said, my friends. We have a coordinated entry system for access to services, for homeless services in Clackamas County. When the Veterans Village was sited off of well, it's in unincorporated, it's near Gladstone. Anyway, when we cited the Veterans Village, a lot of the business community neighbors in that area had the same concern, Mayor Walters. If you put this here, there's going to be people experiencing homelessness camping all over, and it's just going to be a mess. That didn't turn out to be the case. So that because it's not a walk-in program, right? It's a program where you have to go through coordinated entry, be identified as a veteran experiencing homelessness, and then you're referred to the program. And then that program says, okay, we got your referral, we're going to meet with you, you're going to be a program participant. And it's so it hasn't happened. That issue hasn't been there. But I think something that to kind of key in on what Chief Ban and Bill said is it's a valid concern. These are it doesn't do any good to demonize and say that's just bigotry or whatever. And it's the solution is to be solutions oriented, which is what I saw the city of Oregon City do which led to the creation of the Homeless Solutions Coalition of Oregon City. There's people relieving themselves on the sidewalk in downtown Oregon City. Should we consider, getting rid of the services in this community so that we don't have people coming? Well, that's not a solution, because people experiencing homelessness don't exist because there are services. They exist because they can't afford housing, right? And instead of that, what Chief Band and the group that came together to create the Homeless Solutions Coalition was, they got porta potties and they provided a solution. And so now people had access to toilets. So having a solutions-oriented approach, coordinating with our partners, with law enforcement, we can solve these challenges.
Great, thank you. Mayor Smith.
Yeah, I think I have a quick question. Has the county or done a study, or have you looked into the zones within a community that have been found to be most suitable for a shelter? You talked about Vahid, you talked about, needing land for shelters and finding good locations. And I thought I had in my notes at one time that Clackamas County actually modified their industrial zone in order to allow a homeless or a shelter. So I was wondering, have you studied that, or did you look into studies that could help all of us know, like, is there certain zones within our cities that would be most appropriate?
Maybe not precisely that. I think also Commissioner Sabas might know more from the planning department of anything that I'm not aware of, but I know that there is a task force in the county that has a lot of department leaders. I'm a part of the task force to kind of work through homelessness and housing issues. And we developed a kind of a criteria checklist to use when, before considering a property. But it's not really a zone analysis. It's more a series of steps where we need to be sure that the right people are connected with, the right engagement happens at the right stages, that the due diligence is necessary to assess the property is done. And in the middle of that, there's a health impact assessment. And so that's not a global study of what is the best place in an abstract sense to site a shelter, but it is a specific analysis by public health, the Division of Public Health, that says the location being proposed, is it safe? Does it further the social determinants of health? Does it have any adverse effects for the health of the participants or the surrounding community? That kind of thing. But Commissioner Sabas, I don't know if there's something that more directly speaks to Mayor Lyle Smith question.
Yeah, so in the packet, you'll see down towards the end of the pages there, you'll see some mention there of the city of Eugene, the Eugene Springfield. And many years ago, we went down there for our national association, or not a national, but our state association of counties. And I used to live in Eugene area, so I knew the area pretty well. And they addressed it pretty quick. They had a shelter there that was well ran, and they broached it actually originally with veterans because people have a lot of respect for and see the need and so forth. And they built off of that. And they were able to say, if we can run this one right, we can run other ones correctly. And so the city, the neighborhoods, and everyone got around that, got behind that, and they were able to do that and really branch out on that. So when we did the Veterans Village, I worked with Commissioner Farr from Lane County and used their governance model, so to speak, of how the folks within the community, the people that are houseless, that are in the shelters themselves, or these pods, work together to manage themselves, to keep the neighborhood safe, keep the community around them. They knew that the word there was that if we don't do this right, we're going to lose this place. So they knew that they had to manage themselves and keep everyone in line, and so that they didn't want to create a disruption for the community. So that area was on the edge of an industrial area, still is today, an industrial area, and nearby there's a housing community on the other side of the railroad tracks down there. So when we did the Veterans Village, it happened to be a piece of property that our development agency owned in the industrial area. We had it. Commissioner Schrader and I walked the community, business owners, and they were not accepting it. It was basically, heck no. And they were stomping their feet. But we didn't let that deter us, and our DTD staff, and with the assistance of the Administrator Krupp at the time, Don Krupp, we got together a but a multi-department effort to Health and Housing Services, DTD, West. How do we make this thing happen? How do we stand this facility up? And I'm sorry for the long-winded response here, but I think it's really something that it was very meaningful. And I think it's something to build off of. So by doing that, we had the first, to your zoning question, we had the first facility in the state of Oregon as a shelter that actually approved the land use process for it. And we even had the Association of Industrial Property Owners come at us because we were, so to speak, flipping an industrial property towards something different than industrial. So we had a lot of friction. I'll just tell you, the hearing was pretty intense. We had a lot of pushback, but we persevered. And frankly, we promised, and with the help of the law enforcement at the time, we made the assurances to the community that whatever the issue was, that we'd be in front of it. And if we didn't get it right, we would shut it down. And so that was a big leap of faith. In short time, the neighbors, that being the business owners, were not only okay with it, but they even put some of the folks there to work. They actually had a job here there locally. The other rewarding thing was Northwest Housing Alternatives worked with us in the county, and we built Clayton Moore, a 24-unit veterans housing unit for permanent housing. And I remember the very first day when we cut the ribbon on that place, I went in, I spoke to some of the residents in there, and one of the first person I sat down with, a veteran, actually resided at the Veterans Village and was now living at Clayton Moore, had permanent housing. I can't tell you how rewarding that was. It was just so rewarding to see that transition up. Just goes to show the good work, working with a good management group that was do good in Multnomah, did a great job, great job for us then and still is today in managing that place. So it's really about the management, I really think, of the facility. And I don't think you necessarily need to have any special zoning. So I really think it's finding the right place and making sure that the city can accommodate it, or the jurisdiction can accommodate that and say it's okay. And now with is it HB 2006, Fahid? Is that the one? Is that basically no longer has that zoning barrier. So with HB 2006, you can, jurisdictions can allow people to place them. I think the cautionary thing that I have learned from Multnomah County is, and from others is that when you site it near a residential area, you're gonna have problems. You'll have challenges. So I would say access to transit, access to services, access to good food, access where law enforcement and emergency services can be there. Having visibility is always a good thing, but we can probably share some of we're still working on our criteria list as far as citing. Vahid and others, we're all doing some great work on how we get that done, but zoning is not so much an issue. It's really about finding the right place. And if you look at other areas that use the turnkey model, for example, that flipped hotels to housing that were purchased in other parts of the state, most of those that I've seen have been where hotels typically are, right? Along commercial corridors where there are some services there. The one in Milwaukee, near where I live, the Econo Lodge, we had some as far as acquisition. We never made it across the finish line as far as acquisition, but that facility is still being used today. Never stopped. It's still being used today as the Comfort Suites is for sheltering. So we are leveraging that. We've learned a lot there. I know I talked to Mr. Stewart about that as well, as far as trying to get some of the issues and challenges around those sites when it came to law enforcement challenges. But I've said a lot to answer your question, but zoning is not so much an issue. It's just really about, I think, the relationship with the neighbors and making sure that you can assure them and stand behind them if they have any challenges, working with, whether it's Mr. Stewart or others, or law enforcement, to make sure it's well managed.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councilor Pratt, your question.
First, I want to thank you for the presentation. It was very enlightening, and I really appreciated Chief Band's statements about needing to have a person or a coordinated effort to provide these services. My question, I was really interested in what you had about the youth households. I recently was shocked to find out how many of our high school kids are couch surfing. And I see this increase in our documents here in our packet in the youth, but then you followed up with saying it could be attributed to increased outreach services for youth. So my two questions are, one, are you seeing a increase in the youth that are homeless? And two, what are these outreach services that are being provided that have increased?
Yeah, thank you, Councilor Pratt. Yes, we are seeing an increase in the number of youth experiencing homelessness. That in that statistic you saw, that was the subpopulation that had the largest increase year over year of all groups. The county successfully competed for a federal grant 2 years ago or 3 years ago called the Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, Yhdp. And through that significant award to the county, we stood up a continuum of youth homeless services, including outreach to youth experiencing homelessness. So that was the result of new funding that we received through competing for that. It's now kind of baked in as part of our federally funded continuum of care, and we are growing the continuum of youth homelessness services, and will be with the supportive housing services measure. So that's the increased outreach was because we had new funding to stand up new programs.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Stewart, your question.
Yes, hi. In the past, we've had some good representative with the livability program, but question is, what are we actively doing about really rural areas? Are we looking for the people that need help? Are we patrolling the sheriffs, or should we neighbors be turning money is not the right word, but connecting with you to get help to people who are camped out here? Because there's a lot of rural area in Clackamas County.
I'll jump in first on that. We've had a program called the Neighborhood Livability Project that started about 4 years ago now on McLaughlin and 82nd, where we had what we were calling zombie houses that were in foreclosure, but they had become drug houses and hang out. And we realized we weren't doing a good job of resolving that. Well, we now have a partnership amongst county agencies that can address that. And ultimately the county council can work to shut these houses down if we need it. We've now expanded into the more rural parts of our county, and the challenge has changed. We now come across properties in 20, 50 acres or more that have a number of RVs and plus also people camping. And we're addressing those projects. The short answer is we do want to hear about that. So you can either go to code enforcement, the sheriff's office, you can reach out to me, tell me what you've got, and we'll do an assessment. Our group meets monthly, and we try to develop individualized solutions or approaches to address these. I will say one of the areas that we have not accomplished, at least my goal, is trying to help people that we end up pushing off of these properties. We're still struggling to have outreach capability that can reach all the way throughout the county, through the most rural areas. For instance, the LEAD program right now, we have about 180 people in the program, and we have somewhere around 60 on the wait list. We're hoping that's going to change, and we'll have that outreach, because that's really how you address that. You really have the capability to go out to them. Quite frankly, you can't expect somebody who's experiencing homeless in Estacada or someplace like that to come into Red Soils to get services. It just doesn't work that way. Such a long bus ride, and you got to change 2 or 3 times. So short answer question, send them to us and we'll do our best to address it.
Okay, yeah, it's like you said Estacada, but even outside of Estacada, where there is no bus, nothing.
Right,
yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah, and we're good. Thank you for the help you gave us a few years ago out here. Yeah.
If I could add to that, I think one of the exciting things about the Metro Bond, the supportive housing services funding that will be coming in, is before the Metro Bond, and Vahid, if my numbers are incorrect, please chime in, there was around $8 million in the county for homeless services. When the full Metro bond revenue is here, there'll be an additional 52 million. So that's now 60 million. The 52 million has to be for services within the metro area. But that will allow the county, and they've already started it. I sit on the Clackamas County HUD Continuum of Care Steering Committee. We've already started looking at how can we take some existing resources and put them into the rural parts, the metro parts of the county. So as a ripple effect of the metro bond, all of the county is going to see a growth in services.
Thank you both. The only thing I'll add is just a plug for coordinated entry. We have a coordinated housing access program. I put the link in the chat there. So with respect to people experiencing homelessness in the rural areas, you can also connect people to that. And then once folks are connected to coordinated housing access, we can do outreach to them and connect them to services.
And the wonderful thing about coordinated access is when I go out and do presentations, I never give the phone number of the Annie Ross shelter. Because if you call the Annie Ross shelter, all I can do is let you know about our shelter and if we have an opening. But if you call the coordinated housing access, that team is aware of all of the programs that are in Clackamas County and which programs are accepting openings or accepting referrals today. So it's not really a one-stop shop, but it's a nice doorway where people can go and get a direct referral to a program that can help them today.
Thank you. I have two questions real quick. First one is, if a city has already implemented some sort of warming or cooling shelter piece in their communities, who do they communicate with at Clackamas County to let the county know that that's occurring already?
They can reach out to me. So that will be a part of the work that I'm coordinating going forward. Also, the folks in social services, Erica Silver or Brenda Durbin. But Mayor Hudson, that's something that I can definitely sort of be a point of contact on. So I understand the question. So it's a group's offering some sort of warming shelter, but it's not connected to county funding. It's just sort of happening on its own. And the question is how to connect that to the county so we know about it.
Yeah. So we have in Canby. So we have a church that sets up a warming shelter when for every winter they have a group of volunteers that is on the go and ready. If the temperatures look like they're going to dip below into the 30s, they'll activate the volunteer team and create a warming shelter for families and individuals. They coordinate it off to where that, families can be there as well as individuals, men or women. And so I don't know, it doesn't sound like they're tied in at all to Clackamas County and letting them know, or just that partnership piece, or even having the county aware that they exist and do that. And then they do the same thing in the summer when it's usually during the day, they'll open up for people to be, to come cool off when it's over 90 or 95. So I was just trying to connect them. And I know that as we look at this as a potential stepping stone to other avenues, that could be initial groundwork for some of the rural communities to connect and start, I guess, creating that foundation. Okay. My other question was, if cities or organizations want to start shelters or move to creating partnerships for maybe low-income housing, what's the partnership between a city or organization look like with either Vahid and your team or what does that look like, or what's the best first step that we as cities, rural or urban, can do to start the process and open the door for conversation?
Yeah, that's great. I think that reaching out to me or to the other leadership of Health, Housing, and Human Services, Rodney Cook is the director. This is, there's a city representative here that has reached out to me that we've been in talks about potential sites in that city and augmenting services for folks experiencing homelessness in that city. And that's really a great thing to have happening. So I think it could start with just that kind of connection. And, the partnership might look like funding. It might be that the jurisdiction and the community partner have a concept and it needs financial support to get off the ground. And that could be where we fit. And then we plug that project into the backbone, into the infrastructure. So the coordinated entry system, the next step out of the shelter into permanent housing, and making sure that those resources and services of that continuum is plugged into that program. So I welcome collaboration and creative conversation with any jurisdiction like that.
Great, thanks, Vahid. Appreciate that. Mayor Buck and then Mayor Fitzgerald, and we'll kind of maybe start to move into our next topic here. But Mayor Buck, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Gentlemen, thank you. You touched briefly on the various substance abuse disorders, other behavioral health issues, and their intersection with homelessness. Can you explain briefly just the land? And we know the situation here in Oregon in terms of access to addiction recovery services, especially. Can you touch briefly on what the landscape looks like here in Clackamas County and kind of what kind of the current plan is to help expand that access, kind of for people experiencing homelessness, but also for everyone?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Buck. I think that Clackamas County isn't any different than the rest of the state, and that there's just a dearth of these resources. There's an incredible human resources challenge with that sector, right? Something like 55% of the positions in addiction and recovery jobs in organizations are unfilled. So there's a human resources crisis with that as well. The Department of the Behavioral Health Division in Health, Housing, and Human Services and health clinics, which has a behavioral health component, and my team are meeting regularly right now to look at new funds coming from the state. So there's a lot of new money from OHA that's coming to Clackamas County to support behavioral health housing. And that's going to be kind of a new thing for, the Behavioral Health Division doesn't do housing, they do behavioral health. And I don't do so much behavioral health, I do housing and homelessness. But with the Supportive Housing Services Program, we are investing in behavioral health as it relates to the housing system. So behavioral health specific outreach, behavioral health wraparound supports in shelter and in housing. And we're looking at funding, permanent supportive housing programs that have on-site clinical staff providing behavioral health services. So, behavioral health housing. So I think the plan right now is to really look at a lot of new resources. There's a lot of money coming out of the legislature this year, both for housing and then also for behavioral health. And so we are trying to crosswalk that and marry those investments into kind of mutually reinforcing expansion of the system, but it's early yet.
Right, and that's great. And just real quick, do you happen to know? What are we looking at here in Clackamas County in terms of beds? People that need inpatient treatment.
I don't. That isn't my area of expertise, Mayor Buck, so I don't have that at the tip of my brain, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
Just one quick thing that I would add in regards to the mental health services. For a very long period of time, long before COVID, there's been a growing shortage of psychiatrists. It is a field that is narrowing and narrowing and narrowing. And the number of psychiatrists, new psychiatrists that graduate each year has been on a decline. And for mental health services, while you can have a team of therapists and family therapists and even nurse practitioners, at the top of that is a psychiatrist. So in addition to other of the behavioral health and certainly the substance use disorder programs that are experiencing staffing shortages, psychiatry nationwide has been on a decline. And so it's something that does need to be addressed.
Just want to add real quickly to some of this that Clackamas County received funding from the state legislature last year. Was a direct allocation for our public health team to build a mobile van unit. And so they will be partnering with our behavioral health team. That's just one van, but it allows us to be mobile and kind of be responsive within different communities. You know, different counties have different resources to have multiple similar resources. That's not a bad, but that is some of that, you know, initial contact outreach that we've been talking about tonight. So that's one. We can certainly try to find more money for more, but that's money and resources.
Thanks, Trent. Mayor Fitzgerald.
Thank you. Darkness is coming on me. I'm sitting outside here now, but I thank you very much. I wanted to say, come back to how wonderful this presentation is. We've all been to a lot of presentations about this issue, and I think this is the best one I have ever attended. And I'm thinking how great it would be if we could do a redo of the panelists and get that on film and show it to every service club in the area, because there is growing opposition to the use of some of the dollars that the voters made available for this problem. And I think the more people that can hear the reality of the situation that we hear from all the speakers, including Commissioner Savas's experience setting up the Veterans Village and gaining support from the neighbors as it was put together. All those things are really helpful because I think we are going to have headwinds in making much progress here because of the way information is shared. So then the other one, the chief of police brought up the need for coordination. And we've talked about that a lot in this committee. And I know that the county is putting together an information sheet and so forth. But maybe Trent or others could help us look into, what would really be helpful? What does the county need so that we can all be as coordinated as possible? And, would each city need to contribute something? Those are just some thoughts that I had. And thank you for this presentation.
Thank you, Mayor.
I think that's a good segue for me to jump in and say, help me help you. Each of you represent your own jurisdictions, and this is a table with the word coordination in its title. I'm here to help us find, mutual goals, facilitate the policy directions that y'all want to go towards. And so if there's something from tonight that you want me to bring more of back to this group, I'll do it. I'll work with the executive committee to help y'all do that. I'm at y'all's discretion to move this conversation forward as best as we can, as fast as you want to. If you want to have more conversations, we can facilitate them. If you want to go visit some of these sites in Eugene or in the Veterans Village or other locally to kind of see how that might match some of y'all's needs within your own communities, I'm happy to set that up. If you want me to bring speakers, from outside, happy to figure it out. This is the type of work that I think we can all get really excited about, and it's still new in some ways to many of you. So I really am open to helping y'all reach whatever goal you need to work towards in order to be successful within your communities and for Clackamas County in general. So I think we can do a lot, and I'm here to help y'all do that.
Thank you, Trent, for that. I appreciate that. And before I go to Commissioner Savas, I just for everyone kind of noodle here as Commissioner Savas makes his comments is what's next? What all, to echo Trent's comments, what next pieces do we want to do with this? I mean, the e-board gets together the following week and talks about the next agenda and even future agendas. So, to Trent's point, if it's more speakers, it's more dialogue with, Vahid and Mr. Stewart and Mr. Rosenblatt and Chief Band to bring them back and have more dialogue or next steps or how-tos, whatever. So think about that for a minute. And Commissioner Savas, your comments, please.
Yeah, well, I'm going to actually just piggyback on what you just spoke to, Mayor, and then speak just shortly about what I initially raised my hand for. I think that one of the things that you can all look for in your cities perhaps is there a right place that might be perhaps ideal, whether it's for car camping perhaps, or a building that can be converted, or for a shelter or whatnot. But I think sites that might be acceptable is key. It's never easy. We're happy to walk everyone through that and participate in that. The car camping one, I did want to speak to a little bit briefly as an entry level, so to speak, you want to call it that. And, I was thinking when we were talking about rural to Margie Stewart's question about rural, that's something that's really kind of, it can be, with these motorhomes, there's people living in cars, they're living in their pickups, they're living in vans, whatnot. But to Mr. Stewart's point that he made, and it's really, really important when you want to help these folks, if you can't reach them, if you can't contact them to give them that continual help, to get them to services, that makes it very challenging. If they're somewhere, whether it's at a car camping facility or they're at some kind of a facility and they're accessible, we can get them, whether it's even a mailing address or whatnot, so they can get mail, something, they get connected and transitioned. Those are huge, important things that we don't think about. But getting back to sites where perhaps something can be set up is probably the biggest entryway into doing something. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councilor Heisey.
Chair, did you want us to answer that question now, or did you want us to answer it later? Because I was going to give you an answer now.
Oh, give me an answer now.
Okay, right now.
Right now.
So
you guys are all thinking about it. You're noodling.
There's two things that come to mind. One is truly educational resources for the community around what it's like to have a camping site in a church parking lot in your community. Examples of what it's like to have the Veterans Village in this community. People talked about those things very eloquently here. Having a 2-minute video that talks about what that experience is like and gives us a counter to the negative stereotypes and the NIMBYism and all of the community rejection that comes before people even have an opportunity to really engage with what this would look like if it is being sited near their home. That would be a tremendous resource. We have places where something could happen, but having pieces like that available to us will really help make it apparent to the community that this isn't something that we're trying to impose upon. It is something we are trying to do with. And these are examples of how this has been accomplished with a community in other places. The other thing I'd say is, I would love to see a little more from community partners who serve traditionally underrepresented communities around houselessness. We have substantial Spanish-speaking population here, and we in the city have a challenging time connecting with them at all. So I know that our ability to connect with our Spanish-speaking houseless population is not great either. So some more, just hearing more from community partners who have that expertise, I think would really be nice for a future meeting. And thanks, this has really been a great presentation.
It's funny you should mention that about underrepresented groups, because my equity and inclusion officer here at the county has requested if the May C4 meeting, which happens to be Cinco de Mayo, so another coincidence there, is a good opportunity to bring back a check-in with the study and research that the Coalition for Community of Color is working on. That's a countywide project that many of y'all have already invested at your cities, and that might be a nice segue into what you're just talking about right there, Councilor Heisey. So that's an opportunity to bring forth at the Cinco de Mayo C4 meeting.
So and Councilor Heisey, thank you for throwing out some ideas. I appreciate that. That gives us something to chew on a little bit, and I think everyone else. I look at a couple of things. So out in Canby, there's the Wilsonville rest stop northbound if you're coming up from Salem. And I know many of you are aware of that rest stop and its history. And there was a time when that was, it was overnight camping. And Canby School District would run a school bus in the mornings out to that rest stop to pick up Canby students and bring them into the schools, and then would run them home, after home being the rest stop there at the end of the school day. So it's not so as I hear this presentation and have this conversation, and as I peruse through in our packets, page 22 of our packets through 28, which is the housing session number 2, the transitional shelter options. To me, I look at this as an opportunity to, as Canby is doing the housing needs assessment, we're looking at our comp plan and redoing that. We're having conversation about zoning, different zoning pieces in our city and what's still relevant and what still works. How do we incorporate this conversation into that one? How do we take these ideas that are in our packets and bring them back to our councils and say, okay, is there any of this that we talk about wanting to do it, right? And we go, we've had the NIMBY conversation of, hey, yeah, I think that should happen, but not over here because I live right around the corner. Can you do it somewhere else? Okay, but where is that, and which one of these, if any of these, can a community do? If you look at Clackamas County, is it something here, something over there? How do we work collaboratively to make options happen? So I think as we noodle this and come off of this, and we as the exec session maybe look at some of those pieces, if there are ideas, please feel free to get them to myself or Tammy or to Paul, or right into Trent, and we can add that to conversation at the executive board to determine what to bring back to everybody. But this is a good dialogue, and we have a problem, and it's growing. It's not just a Portland problem. It's not just a Clackamas, unincorporated Clackamas Town Center, Happy Valley issue. It's not an Oregon City issue. It's becoming a bigger Sandy issue, a bigger Canby issue, and all points in between. So it will take all of us working together to hopefully make a dent in this. So to our panelists, thank you. I know Chief Band had to get off, but thank you to everyone. And yes, a thumb up to Mayor Fitzgerald's suggestion, action. So thank you, panelists, for being here. Appreciate that. More to come on this. So we appreciate you all. Thank you. Move into the I-205 RTP regional discussion update. Trent, do we have anyone here to update us, or is that you?
We do. Jamie Stasny is here from Clackamas County DTD, and she has been with us many times to keep us updated on the status of the 205 RTP amendment. And a lot has happened. A lot, y'all have worked towards a lot. Most of y'all's meetings in the last year have been about this in some form or fashion. And a lot has happened in March. And so we're kind of at this interesting point. We wanted to give you just a quick moment of a debrief so that y'all were up to speed, since y'all have been staying so close to it. We didn't want you to have just a total cold turkey step away from the I-205 topic. Jamie?
Perfect. Jamie, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, everyone. Good to see you again. I am back again and here just to provide hopefully a quick update. We don't have much time, and I know some of you around this table or this virtual table may want to fill in some blanks because you were at those meetings and casting votes. So I'll just be very brief to share that the I-205 toll project moved through the Jpac committee. This was a couple weeks ago now. The recommendation from that committee was to approve the ordinance for the RTP and the MTIP. There were some amendments to the draft language, some brought forward by Councillor Heisey and Councillor Lewis. And those essentially were tightening up some language around requirements for mitigation. And then also I'll just mention there was another recommendation around the timing of the tolling of 205 that was brought forward by Councillors Heisey and Lewis, which did not get approved. But the package as a whole did move forward with a recommendation for approval. There's a lot more there, but I'm going to move on, talk about impact. And Councillor Heisey, I see you there. If you want to fill in some blanks or if I missed something, please, we'll have time here in just a second. So impact then moved on to have a conversation last week, and they also had a very lively conversation. I see you there, Mayor Buck, the chair of impact, so you may also want to fill in some blanks. But ultimately, their recommendation was to not approve the ordinance for the RTP amendment. They just look at the RTP over there at impact because it's a land use document, so not to approve the ordinance. But they did have a suggestion to move forward with a consideration that was brought forward by Councillor Sherman, essentially to sunset the tolling on I-205 after phase 1A is complete and all of the costs are paid for, including the mitigation and all of the different pieces, if they're not able to get the RMPP up and going by then. So he brought forward that amendment that was actually recommended for approval. So I believe their recommendation to Metro Council will be don't approve the ordinance, but if you are going to, please consider this as a possibility. So that was essentially what's moved forward through those committees. Now the decision will go to, or the conversation will go to Metro Council. That will occur on next Thursday on the 14th. And I have not seen the packet yet. I don't believe it's out to see kind of how things are going to be presented, but I see Councillor Craddock here tonight. She may want to fill in some blanks as well. So I'll stop talking and leave space if anyone wants to chime in, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Great. Thank you, Jamie, for that. Commissioner Sabas. You're muted, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I was in contact with Councillor Sherman this morning, and I talked to a few people about this, and that is that his amendment, I think, has some great elements to it, but one of them that concerns me is that, and he seemed to agree, I don't know if what's going to come of it, but perhaps the language could be altered a little bit, that it's not just limited to phase 1A, that it includes the entire 5.8 miles, the lanes, if you will, that the lanes are included before if there is a, an effort to sunset it, that we sunset the entire project, not just phase 1A. That would be that'd be one little amendment, and he seemed to be understands that, I believe. And I don't know if there'll be altered language or an amended language to address that. So don't know if there's anyone here that can speak to that, but I just want to throw that out there, that might be something that might come forth.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Buck.
Well, yes, the gist of the amendment was basically, I think that everyone at Impact 2, the voting got a little screwy because essentially the folks there are some real proponents of this project in Washington County, no surprise, and they did not want to, I believe, cast a no vote for this project. And so they kind of scuttled, honestly, our voting a little bit, because I believe the group, what they wanted to do was pass basically a recommendation that would say, if you move forward with this project, please consider this amendment, the amendment that Councilor Sherman. There was near unanimous support for this amendment, but there were also some folks who were just completely opposed to the tolling project, wholesale. And then there's some other folks who are completely in support of the project as presented, and they didn't want to have to vote for it with this caveat. So the voting got a little messy in that regard. But I believe in terms of the amendment, it's just the notion that let's say 50 years from now, when the entire project, is paid for, that if there isn't the regional mobility pricing project, if there's not greater region-wide tolling, we just don't want this section of I-205, this region here in Clackamas, to be the one tolled section of interstate in the entire region. And we understand that that's a long shot that would ever be the case, but it's just to give us some certainty, that that would not ever, if the long shot did, materialize, that would not be the case. So I don't know where the 1A language, I don't recall that even being part of language in the discussion at MPAC. As I understand it, it is, as Commissioner Sapp was saying, it's for the whole project. It's the whole project.
Thank you. Commissioner Craddock.
Thank you very much. I really enjoyed listening to your discussion about homelessness and shelters. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Councillor Lewis is representing Metro in another place. We happen to have, I thought you might be interested. We are the Yhdp tribe in Northern California that live along the Klamath River, have been recognized by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to be a release site for the condor program. And Councilor Lewis is the deputy president of Metro Council right now. And so she is in California representing Metro at this ceremony to recognize the Yhdp tribe as a release site for the condor. I'm sorry, I will get back to my real reason of why I raised my hand. But what that means, though, is they live just a few miles from the border of Oregon. And it does mean that when the condor are released in that area, that it's a real good chance that they will be flying in Oregon again, which we have not had condor flying in Oregon since before the white settlers. So it's quite remarkable. So the reason I raised my hand is I just want to let so Metro Council and Jpac, we form the MPO. And so when an amendment comes forward to the Metro Council from Jpac, or when there is a vote, we are not allowed to change that vote. We can vote for it or we can oppose it, but we cannot change it. And so if there was going to be an amendment, the Metro Council would have to not approve the amendment that comes to us next week, and we would need then to send it back to Jpac for a modification. So I know there's been discussion, like we've been involved in some of your conversations about this possibility of an amendment, but we do not have the authority to do that, and that's up to Jpac.
Councilor Craddock, before you go too far, can you please let this group know where those condors are bred?
Well, happen to be in Clackamas County, of course. I assume that most of you know that. Very proud of the facility. It's I have never been there. It's very protected, and the condor have no contact with humans while they're there. So it's all done by robots. They move the eggs in and out of the nest to make sure they're viable and that they're living, and the condor never have access to people. And so, but they are released in Arizona, they're released in California, and now there'll be a third site for release. So it's a real opportunity. So thank you for letting me interrupt your discussion about transportation and home and housing.
Thank you very much. Councilor Heisey.
I've been furiously searching through my emails to find the very long and intense thread of back and forth between myself, Councilor Lewis, Metro legal staff, and ODOT folks that was transpiring over the course of the 36 hours leading up to the Jpac vote, and I have failed to do that. So I'm just gonna give you the very succinct, it's been 2 very long weeks since then, summary, and say that the changes that we proposed in those amendments were to very significantly, actually, I think, strengthen the language that required a series of commitments from ODOT, including but not limited to commitments to have actual local authority, some local control in decision-making processes regarding mitigation. If you have further questions about that and you would like to see the language, I will eventually find it, but I'm just not that great at searching through Outlook.
Great, thank you. Mayor Buck.
So sorry, one more thing. So Councilor Heising was saying, about that local piece. So ODOT as part of, I mean, depending on how, things go going forward, but if things go forward, part of their commitment, is to stand up this a kind of policy advisory committee. I'm sure Jpac probably asked some questions about that and Yhdp did as well. They were a little vague in terms of how that committee is going to be stood up. But there are, I mean, we, I guess as a group really should be advocating for when they stand in this committee that they allow, folks in Clackamas County to choose the folks who are representing Clackamas County on that committee instead of like the OTC just selecting.
Are you talking about the tolling committee?
No, this is a, well, is it a tolling? It's a committee that's come up through the, it's one of the agreements that ODOT made through the course of this RTP. A new committee.
Yeah, it was poised to be initially the R1 Act Plus, but we don't know exactly what they're going to approve. So we're hoping to have some representation that would advise the OTC as opposed to just be a listening body from ODOT, which the R1 Act Plus originally was.
Yeah, I think it was a listening body. Sorry, it was speaking and hopefully being listened to, but not really, if I'm being totally honest on this particular topic. Sorry, it's been a long day. My filter's wearing out for tonight.
Can I just add, there's also another layer of committee in there.
Of course.
Of course, because that's where we're at. But the diversion committee that has been meeting regularly is also sort of written into the rule of the land in some of those amendments and ODOT in ODOT's commitments document that was part of this whole process and was voted on and accepted. There is an ongoing role for that committee, which has been largely city staff, very local to 205. Trent is giving this thoughtful look, so I may not be saying it exactly the right way, but that was just another piece of the conversation.
No, that's really good. It's an ad hoc subcommittee of C4 at this point, in lieu of nothing else that had been created yet. So probably expecting some sort of transition, but in the meantime, this group chaired by Mayor Walters and Commissioner Savis, they are focusing on these questions of diversion. They're going to take a look at that. We've just actually had a meeting with ODOT today. The April meeting will be about looking at those commitments that are, in theory, going to be approved or not. We'll see on April 14th by Metro, and taking a chance to look at those commitments and seeing if and what are possible next steps for how to make recommendations around those diversion commitments that ODOT is making, which will start with some policy level commitments and then probably take a deep dive into actual intersections and routes, of where diversion could happen. So it's a slow process because they're still collecting data. They're really, and they say this a lot, they're building the plane as they fly it. So it feels like it's moving slow, and it's been a lot of information at that subcommittee, and we haven't really given an update to this group yet. It's happening now, I guess. So thanks for taking a couple minutes to hear that.
Councilor Craddock.
I just want to say thank you to all of you that represent jurisdictions in Clackamas County in the urban areas. You've just done a great job with your discussions and creating plans moving forward. You've really definitely led the region in this discussion, and can't thank you enough. I've really been pleased and really appreciate that work. It's really been very helpful. And I was really pleased with the outcome. We'll see this next week the position that the Metro Council will be taking, but you definitely have strengthened this work. And as you've been discussing for months, this could really be a totally different program if you hadn't taken the position that you've had. So thank you very much for all that you've done to make this, get us in the position that we're in right now.
Well, thank you, Councilor. And Mayor Buck, you sound very intrigued by the condors right now. And so looks like you have a new research project between everything else you've got going on. I just want to take a moment and just kind of, I guess, double check the water temperature here on the tolling piece, because if we as a group, and it seemed, I just want to know if we've changed course or we've maybe like thrown our hands up here a little bit. But I thought at one point, I thought that, Clackamas County, in terms of the BCC C4, in conjunction with some feelings from Metro Council, that we were all on the same page, or at least on a singing from the same hymnal, that we were not real excited about tolling, and we were not real excited about congestion pricing, however you want to label it, and that we were pressing this OTC and the state to come up with another way to fund this than through this methodology of tolling and congestion pricing. Is that still the intent or our position as a group here in C4? And I guess the collective groups I had mentioned, or are we just kind of to the point where, like, well, this is going to move forward. We don't have much say in it. And so our best bet is a collective group between C4, Metro, BCC, is to make it as least impactful and harmful to our county citizens as we can. Can someone clarify where we maybe are at with all these various meetings that are going on? So I'm looking really at Trent, who already has his hand up, and Jamie to also kind of weigh in. So Trent, you're first, and then we'll let Jamie speak.
Thanks. I'll say to your question, I'm your C4 staff. I'll go do what you asked me to do. That's how this works. But I want to make sure that y'all know what your resources are. One thing is, you have an outstanding letter that has not been replied to by the OTC. I'm happy to go check on that letter, but we also know that the OTC made their decision to basically not diversify the funding with those IIJA funds, because that decision happened, was that a week ago? So that's not moving forward. So they haven't replied to you, but that decision's kind of made, at least where it revolves around those particular funds. Whether or not Metro passes that RTP amendment on the 14th could push over another set of dominoes. So that's also something that's on the horizon, where there could potentially be more time to engage in that conversation. Another touch point is the upcoming release of the draft EA for the tolling the NEPA of the tolling project. And that will have a comment period. That's another area where this group will have a chance to participate in comment and shaping how this policy is unpacked. In addition to that, nothing has been decided about what, as far as I know, of course, I'm not at ODOT and I don't represent ODOT and don't play one on TV, but nothing has been decided about what federal grant programs they will pursue. And so they have an opportunity potentially to go and pursue federal grants to diversify the funds, which might potentially lower the cost of this overall project. We know that the bids are coming in high for phase 1A, and that they will probably need to find a way to offset that cost. Of course, the danger of that could be that higher cost means, maybe justifies to them tolling in more of a way. But is this an opportunity then to go get federal funds to help offset those costs, diversify the funds, reduce the impact of tolls, et cetera? Additionally, next year is the 2023 RTP, where decision points will be made also about the I-205 project, also about the RMPP project. These are a variety of touch points that you have around 205 now and into the future. They're not perfect touch points. There's not one that's end all be all. And I want to be very clear about that. A lot of this stuff will be making tight bureaucratic decisions, and this group will be at that table, because Jamie and I will keep making sure that y'all's voice, is spoken at those tables. We'll keep giving y'all our best work so that y'all can be y'all's best selves and represent y'all's community in the best way possible. So I wanted to put those on the table as opportunities to move forward. I can't tell you if this is if it's going to happen or not, if the ship has sailed. I don't know, but I do know that this was a big milestone. It is moving forward. And as Councilor Craddock said, what it looks like today, at the proposal anyway, is very different than what it looked like in December. Y'all's work made it look that way. And so I don't want to, sell that short.
Thanks, Trent. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Jamie, you're up. Lay it on us.
Thanks. I just want to support what Trent said. Great points. We are at the beginning of this conversation. So I agree with Trent, and there are other decision points that weren't even mentioned there that are going to be coming up, and you're going to be asked for your comments and your input. So there's a lot more to come, but I wanted to go back really quickly and talk about one issue, which is ODOT is pursuing what they call Section 129 tolling authority to toll the I-205 segment. That tolling authority is allowed outright by statute. So and we've known this from the beginning, that's the approach they're taking here. They're taking a different approach with the regional tolling. They're trying to do something that is more of a pilot project that requires a higher level of approval from the federal government. So there's a distinction there. I want to call that out, that they do already have that authority in statute. So we are proceeding with great care and cautiousness and intentionality around finding out the most information we can, gathering that, bringing it back to you all so that you can create positions on these topics, especially on the I-205 toll project, because we do not have control on whether or not it will move forward or whether or not they have the authority. They have the authority. So we are here, we're showing up, we're doing our best to prepare you for that, make sure you have the information you need, and you know when there are opportunities to engage and what those kind of triggers are. So it's very nuanced and complicated, but I want to take it back to that very basic fact, which is Section 129 toll authority is allowed outright in statute. And so we have to proceed as though it is going to happen. So I'm happy to answer questions if you have them.
Thanks, Jamie. Commissioner Savas, and then Mayor Kaiser real quick, and we'll move.
Yeah. So one concern I have, and it's no secret, I'm just going to be very blunt about one of my concerns, and that is there is in the region a number of people that are really anti-lane, anti-capacity minded folks for whatever array of reasons. My concern, I don't think we want to see us in a situation where only the Abernathy Bridge, think about this for a moment, only the Abernathy Bridge is improved. It's seismically improved. It's, as designed, phase 1A, as is defined, is built, and nothing else happens other than us being told in perpetuity. I am very concerned about that.
No, that's a great point, Commissioner. Thank you. Mayor Kaiser.
Well, I'm kind of disgruntled with what Trent had to say about, OTC not responding to our letter. And I'm wondering what the rest of the group thinks maybe our next steps need to be, because I believe, us as a single unit, we're not as strong as us as a, complete group. And our state's absolutely ignoring our entire county when we're simply asking questions. And I'm just kind of curious what the rest of the group thinks, if we should just allow them to ignore us, or if we should, stiffen the letter up a little bit and say, hey, we're paying attention here. We'd like some answers.
No, thank you, Mayor Kaiser. I was thinking the same thing. I mean, do we want to follow up with another letter? Is that a phone call from, Commissioner Savas, from, Chair Smith? What does that look like? I guess, group, what direction do we want to give to Trent and or the executive board to start working on?
We would have a lot more punch if it came from all of you by a form of a vote to at least take some measure to reach out to the OTC, and frankly, even the decision of Metro Council on Thursday, to reach out to them as well and send a message. And if we're united, I think that's got way more horsepower if we're all behind it tonight.
Okay. Can I see some head nods of yes, further action from us as a group collectively? Yeah, okay, I've got Mayor Walters. Valerie, thank you. Okay. Councilor Heisey, yes?
Yeah, I need help from Trent here. I'm not saying that this is how it should have gone, but effectively, it seemed like the Oregon Transportation Commission sent their response to our letter to Jpac. And I don't know if that letter was shared to this group or not. I just can't recall. But there was a rather pointed letter sent from the OTC to Jpac. Jamie's nodding. Perhaps you can remember the content better than I. But it might be useful to share that with folks just so that you have that in your mind as well.
I can circulate that probably just to the members. If I did our whole interested parties group, I don't know if it would, be overly incendiary beyond something that's already happened. But in short, the letter said, not no way, not no how. We ain't spending these IIJ dollars on your 205 project. And it mischaracterized what the request was. I want to be very clear about that. The request from this body in December was, please use those funds to diversify the funds of the project. What OTC said back was, we're not going to spend $700 million from this pot, which is the full estimated cost of the project, on this one project in the state. That's not what y'all were asking. And y'all replied in February after a robust conversation following that letter came out to the OTC, because they still had not, they had replied to you via staff, which was also not acceptable. So y'all sent that reply back in February, and that's the response that is, I guess, still outstanding. And for me, like you said, Councilor Heisey, that Jpac letter said what it said. Their decision about IIJ funds has been made as of a week ago. We want to be really clear about how we engage them. But there's a good suggestion here in the chat about inviting the OTC chair, Chair Van Brockland, to the C4 table and have a conversation about, you could take a number of approaches here. Why didn't you reply to our letter is one of them. How can we be more constructive and more collaborative about creating solutions on something that affects all of your communities? And, y'all have taken the high road, and a lot of this conversation, it's gotten y'all very far. That's just my recommendation from staff. It might not feel like it's the best solution or outcome. It's not zero tolling, which would be like, rainbows, but it's not nothing. And y'all have done a lot of good work. Somewhere in between is also an option that you have. And as I've said, I'm here to go and do what you asked me to do, but I wanted to make sure that y'all have that. And this is just me on the fly. That's your range of options.
Thank you, Trent. Thank you, Mayor Buck, for some levity there. Councilor Pratt, and then Councilor Heisey, and then I'll throw something out on the table. Councilor Pratt.
I just wanted to go back to Commissioner Sava's suggestion that we send a letter to Metro, because that vote is coming up, and I think it would be important to share our concerns with them.
All right, thank you. Councilor Heisey.
Yeah, I mean, now I know that you've got a suggestion to throw out there, so maybe my words are moot. I just am starting to feel like this is turning into a bigger conversation than we have capacity for at 8:49 p.m. and wondering if this is essential for us to address now, or if this needs to be a bigger discussion at the next meeting. I'll stop pretending like I know what I'm talking about now.
Nope, you always add value, Councilor, so I appreciate it. Thank you. And I guess my suggestion would be, would this group be okay with at the executive board meeting to flesh out a letter idea and conversation of possibly inviting Chair Van Brockland to a C4 meeting and having, I guess, a Zoom face-to-face, with this group with him. Would that be appropriate actions for the executive board to entertain and then kick back to all y'all relatively quickly? I'm seeing lots of head nods and thumbs up. Okay. All right. Does that seem compatible with you, Trent, and you, Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. For the immediate task at hand, which I think is really the Metro Council decision on Thursday, I think maybe the fastest thing to do, I think Mayor Fitzgerald sent a chat there. What is it we might be talking about, maybe besides this, that addresses that immediate need? I think quickly, we can renew or strengthen the letter that we have already sent and our points that we've made, and just renew that, and whether that's in testimony or whether that's in writing, and just resend the same thing we've sent before, those same points that we have expressed. Some of them have been addressed, so I think we can just update that a little bit. And we have done some great work. We're getting closer, but I still think we are vulnerable again to that point of just seeing the bridge being built, perhaps, and nothing else, but be told in perpetuity. That concerns me.
Okay.
So if there's consensus and head nods, we can just renew what hasn't been addressed, and that one point, and perhaps even something that takes the shape of what Councilor Sherman's amendment was as a suggestion. If that means sending it back to Jpac for a little bit of work, I think that would be constructive. So anyone against that perhaps approach? Maybe thumbs up that people are for that approach.
Yeah, I think we've
I
got.
see Mayor Fitzgerald. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll work on that. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll take that as a yes.
Works for me. Okay. Trent, thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone, for doing that. Jamie, as always, a wonderful job giving us the opportunity to get all spun up again over tolling. So thank you. Trent, you had a real quick thing on you want to throw out the fireworks piece real quick you put in the chat, or was that good enough?
That's good enough. Watch that video if you want to know more. They got some good ideas about setting criteria so that you don't back yourself into a corner at the last minute. So set those criteria ahead of time. Good discussion with CCFD1. I put the YouTube link in there. It's the first 30 minutes. Good to go. Great. But that was a topic that you brought up in April, so I wanted to put it there for you.
Thank you. Jpac impact updates. Jpac first, was that a good enough dialogue that we just had?
I think so.
Perfect. Jpac, same thing. Anything more? Councilor Heisey, is that you have anything to add? Nope. Okay. Any updates from the Climate Action Plan Task Force?
No, they haven't been meeting.
They have not had a meeting yet. Okay. How about supportive housing services update?
They have a $5 million loan from Metro that they're continuing to, it's an advance. They have received over $5 million additional dollars. So they're above $10 million at this point. And that is the current status of their work. There's also another pending advancement from Metro, I believe that's still on the way, but that was decided upon by the board last month, I think, or 2 months ago at this point. It's the beginning of a new month.
All right. Any other business? Going once. I'm going to throw two things out really super quick. One, a discussion maybe next month about returning live. And then the other piece, I shot Trent an email about the resuming Clackamas County Cities dinners. If that was being discussed at all by the BCC, or what did that look like? So not now, giving Trent enough headaches this evening as it is. So, but that's my piece. Any other new business to throw out there? I will make a comment. Councilor Heisey, thank you for the police officer. We swore her in last night, and we're really excited to have her. She's fantastic.
You were very lucky.
Yes, I know we are. She's pretty great. So it's just community sharing. That's all that is. It's all good, right?
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, it was great to see you all. Great meeting this evening. Thank you all for sharing and letting us run long. We do a lot of good things, and I appreciate you all very, very much. So I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Seconded?
Second.
All right, it's non-debatable. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are done. C4, we are out. Thank you for your time. See you all next month.